for the second season, there was a big shift, because usually what happens is that actors, I'm not speaking for all actors, of course, but some actors, and some writers, by the way, get bored with what they're doing in television, because they do the same thing every week, and so they want to do something different because they don't want to do the same thing. And that usually takes third season, fourth season. We did 7 episodes. And suddenly Laura Flynn Boyle wants to smoke cigarettes and wear sunglasses all the time. And you know, and Sherilyn doesn't want to be a kind of fetish object anymore. She wants to be more like Katharine Hepburn. And so, and again, it was one of the great things about the show is that you would sort of try to field all of that and work with it. But even in the sort of, you know, as again, the dark times of Little Nicky in season 2, there was never a moment where you went, oh, we're so fucked. I mean, you just didn't, because you were trying to plow through and trying to connect the dots and try to make it work. And then David, and I think what's typical is that last episode, you know, where we all wrote parts of it, and then David basically just kind of went, and he had this whole vision, and again, it's one of those things at the time I was going, that fucking guy, I'm going to kill him. And then you saw what he did, and you just went, that's the most amazing hour of television I've ever seen. Agreed. You know, and so it came together in a really nice way for me, just as a fan of it, and I started that way, sort of. So in that sense, I think that you just were trying to get, and we were talking about season 3, you know, and there was all those hopes. I mean, I wanted to do an episode where you just fixed a camera on a booth in the diner and just move characters in and out of the booth for 60 minutes. And they could have conversations, and then maybe I just wanted an empty booth for a full minute, which, you know, we'll just do. But we would talk about a third season, and you know, that was really the sad thing, I think, that given it was so singular that I just don't think it could survive in that kind of ecosystem, that no ecosystem that we're in.
I'm glad you brought up the sort of alternate versions that were being prepared for that last episode. Can you tell us what some of the ideas were?
You know, I honestly, no, I can't. I mean, I remember that we went through it, and Mark was back, and so we all had very specific things we wanted to do. Mark and David were involved in conversations with ABC about a third season. So, and if you remember, I think the 7th episode, or that last episode of the first season, had like 49 cliffhangers. So, right? I mean, it was like every possible cliffhanger, and so I think there was, the idea was to do that again here in hopes of kind of getting that momentum going for the final season. But then I think really David just went, no, wait a minute, this is something that I want to do. And we just kind of stood back and went, okay. And then kind of dipped in and out and watched it as it was happening. And I remember Mark and I came to work the same day and almost at the same time said, he looks in the mirror and he's Bob. And we both kind of went, okay, that's got to be the ending, which my stepdaughter still hasn't forgiven me for. She went through she Netflixed everything like last year. She's now 19. And she Netflixed everything. And there was a shout of horror from the living room. Where she went, how could you do that? Right? I mean, that ending just, you know, and it's wonderful, I think. And I think that David, that's the thing about David, is even when you're working with him at times and you go, okay, the motherfucker's crazy and I had it. Then he does something like that last episode and you understand that, I mean, I think the word, even artist, I think, is thrown around way too much. And God knows genius, you know, it's like Stephen Hawking is a genius, okay? Aaron Sorkin is not a fucking genius. That's an easy shot, Aaron Sorkin. But I think that David is as close as I've ever seen in television. I think just the way he works and who he is, and you know much better than I do. But I just, even that brief time working with him, that's my takeaway. That and it makes me sad that he doesn't make movies every year the way some people do, or every other year. And I have no access to why that is. And that's for me unfortunate. But he's just, there's no line.
And I think to add to that, I think he empowers other people to do their best work. It's not just that he walks around the genius. He really does, I think, to actors, to other directors. Yeah. He was like, Les, tell your story. Do it the way you want to do it. And I remember he hardly changed any cuts when you were editing. I mean, you edited it the way you wanted to, and the only thing I remember him changing, I think it was in Jacques Renault's cabin. There was a shot, like a macro shot of the needle going into the groove of a record. And he was like, Les, I love that shot. Can't we look at that for a longer time? I think that was on the screen for like some ungodly amount of time, like 10 seconds or something. That, nowadays that would be, half a second, But yeah, it was amazing. It was a life-changing experience. I thought that's what working in TV was like.
Yes.
So this question is for Peggy, but you all may be able to comment on it. First of all, Peggy, I'd like to thank you for your amazing performance in the Jane Fonda workout video. My wife watches it all the time, and she really loves your work in it. We always say, is there somebody, is Kadada Jones, is she your daughter? So I spent like 4 hours in a grocery store with Kadada once, like in the early 2000s, and that makes me think a lot about food, and I'm just wondering, since the Double R Diner is sort of like the cornucopia, the center of food for the show, what like food, Twin Peaks food, like sort of meant for you folks, and how you folks sort of dealt with Twin Peaks food?
Well, whoever thought up the cherry pie was genius. Who was that artist? David?
That's got to be David.
Yeah.
I would be David.
Exactly. Just to make that as iconic as it was, so that it became a focal point of nourishment, of shooting the breeze, the coffee, the cherry pie, and then it became iconoclast. I guess that's the word that I'm looking for. So, who I don't know what else they served there.
Donuts.
Big Don Donuts.
Bear claws.
Of course.
The mashed potatoes
Sorry,
that
I
your mother
forgot.
tasted.
Donuts.
The mashed potatoes in the episode that your mother came and to see if they were real mashed
Who
potatoes.
played my mom?
I can't remember her
It
name.
was Jane Greer. Jane
Right.
Greer, I mean,
And then she
amazing.
turned out to be the food critic, right?
That's
Yes.
right.
I just thought that.
Mashed potatoes, yeah. And then also, that darling girl played my sister, Heather.
Heather Graham.
Yeah, I just remember that. It's hard to remember all the characters. But yes, the mashed potatoes I remember. So it's diner fare, it's comfort food, it's like, it's not like Alice Waters is all I can say. And it was, I guess it was David's connection with the foods that he loved as, being a Midwestern guy. That's what I think. Thank you for your question.
I also want to give a shout out to my favorite no-line character Toad in the diner. That's a fantastic character that really never had a line in the show, but was always entertaining when he showed up. The guy that you had to kick out of your kitchen. Yes?
I actually have two questions. The first one is about music. I had noticed that there isn't a lot of music that Badalamenti doesn't do in the show, but we saw some of it in the last episode. For example, in the scene where we find out that Andrew hasn't died. He uses his piano concerto, and I was just wondering, I can't even think of any other instances where the series does that, and I was wondering.
Yeah, there are a couple. It was very rare because it was so expensive to license music. And I mean, when Nadine attempts to commit suicide,
Or you can grab a mic.
There were a few other scenes where they licensed some music, but I remember it was just really expensive to license music. So Angelo oftentimes did a knockoff, but with that piece, that was in the public domain, and I think that the performance was some old recording. That it was a Rachmaninoff or something.
I think it was Gruyere.
Okay, and it was. I think it was in the public domain, and I'm not sure if that was Uli's idea or not. I forget. It was probably Uli, I think, that wanted to. Uli Adel. Wasn't that his episode? The director, Uli Adel.
Yeah, I think it was.
Anybody remember? Okay. So yeah, I mean, when Nadine was trying to commit suicide, the director wanted to use Patsy Cline singing Crazy, and it was like $1 jillion to license that, so they couldn't do it.
And is that the only time that there's other music in the series? I can't think of any others.
Yeah, Julie Cruz, but that was all written by David and Angelo.
There's two others.
And let us know, guys.
Oh yeah, and when Pennsylvania 65000, Leland was really into big band music. That's very good.
He did everything. He was so
And then I just had one other question. It might be difficult to answer, but one of the things that I've always found the most interesting about the show is all the different influences and kind of like crossover of genre, like film noir and I guess like melodrama, but also like horror kind of. But all in the setting of this very, very small kind of like granola town. And I was wondering, because you guys had talked about how the show was such a collaborative effort, I was wondering if it had the different influences and different genres had anything to do with all the different people working on the show and directing it, and whether those influences were kind of like personal influences that converged to create this kind of blending of genres.
I mean, I think directors were free to come in and shape the episode. They were given a huge amount of freedom to come in, and Leslie would do that. And Diane Keaton, I remember when she came in, did because it was Diane Keaton, I was like, oh my god. But she did a lot of that too. But I think that the genre hopping, that's really just Mark and David. And I think Mark and David together, they were collaborative in many, many ways. That's when it was definitely the school. And also I know Mark in particular was a huge film fan of it. So all those things would kind of go in there. Even what was the soap within the show? Imitation of Love, which became a huge pain in the ass after a while. Because every time any show tries to do that, inevitably it goes away because it's too hard to produce. But that became, that was another one of those sort of meta things. But I think that was the two of them together. And a little bit of that is also just David. When you think of some of the movies he's made, they frequently veer all over in those places. There'll be noir elements, and there'll be kind of outlandish comedic elements.
But when I think about it, we were given a huge amount of freedom.
Oh, yeah.
Like I remember thinking, okay, why don't we, every time we go to the Great Northern Hotel dining room, let there be a convention going on. So, and that kind of, people started doing that. I remember having an American Indian movement convention, and no one ever, marching band. I did marching band and drill team, and then I did like a sorority convention, Yeah, and it just became, and if anyone noticed, great, but it was just part of the world there, or building some sort of visual sequence that wasn't really scripted.
Right.
I remember doing something with the eye of a crow, and and it was always a full moon, wasn't it?
Yeah, as it should be.
As it should be. Went on for a long time. It was, it was amazing. But yes, we had it in the script. I mean, the scripts were incredible, but you had a lot of freedom visually.
Yeah. No, extraordinary amount of things compared to what happened before.
And from my point of view, in comparison to television today, and I don't know, I'm on a sitcom right now, so our director has nothing to say, very little to say about the creative input of the characters. It's driven by our executives, but in Twin Peaks, the directors had a great deal to do, a lot of input, as you've already heard tonight, the actors and Mark and Bob Engel, everybody, and that isn't my experience today, but I'm not on episodic, so I don't know as an episodic director what the input is.
I'm doing premium cable, and you have a lot of freedom in premium cable, in HBO and Showtime and AMC. But having been, I do some network TV, and that's a whole nother world now. It feels like it's more corporate. And that if people can't give story notes, they give notes about hair, makeup, and wardrobe, because that's what everyone can give a note about. If you know nothing about story, you will, and inevitably you will get wardrobe notes from the least fashionable person. Like if you dress like that person, it would be horrifying.
Or their daughter.
Yeah. Oh yeah, but yeah, my daughter. But yeah.
All right, so we'll take one final question.